Hi, I'm Liz. This is my webcast. My best friend suggested that I make some kind of podcast thing. Um, and at the moment, I've really started getting into mental health, and I'd quite like to be a mental health nurse in the not too distant future. So I kind of thought, while I'm learning new things, it could be useful, even if it's just for my own reference, to kind of talk about them, think about them, explain them a bit. People might want to learn or they might not, that's fine. So I'm kind of just calling it Liz's Talking Thinking because that's kind of what's going on here. I'm going to be talking about thinking um, and also hopefully learning something as well. And anyone else who watches it might do too. The first one I want to start with is resilience. It's one of my most favourite mental health subjects, actually. It's, I think, a really good foundation to start any kind of webcast on as well. Okay, so what is resilience? Why is it important? That's quite the question. Well, being resilient it's basically the cornerstone to having a good, healthy type of mental health. It's absolutely key to your well-being. An example could be this. There could be two kids that grow up in exactly the same household. It could be really dysfunctional. And the two children could be subject to all sorts of abuse. I'm planning on doing a webcast about ACE scores in the future, actually, which is adverse childhood experiences and the effect of trauma on the developing brain and body. But we'll leave that to one side for the time being. Okay, so two kids growing up in the same household, they're pretty much exactly the same. They could even be identical twins. They're both subjected to trauma when they're young. Now, they grow up, one of them might get married, might have a job, might own their own house, might have their own kids, might basically make a really good success of themselves and lead what you'd call a normal life. Now, the other one has been through exactly the same thing, but they may have been incarcerated, or they may have experienced severe mental illness. They may have even been an inpatient in a secure mental health facility. They might be unable to work. They might have very severe, debilitating physical and mental health conditions. And they might also have a very low opinion of their own physical and mental health. They might have addiction issues. They might find it really difficult to cope. They might have a lot of difficulty forming lasting, healthy relationships as well. So if you look at them kind of side by side, they've been involved in exactly the same dysfunctional house. They've both been exposed to trauma from an early age. They've had a very near identical experience. However, one of them has made what one would call a success of their life, and the trauma isn't really dictating their outcome. However, the other one has pretty much gone the other way and really struggled, continues to struggle. Why? Why is that? What's the difference? Well, it's a good question. It's kind of like the nature versus nurture argument, I suppose. Some people will be more predisposed to resilience, which is, spoiler alert, the reason why one of them is able to cope and the other one is not. Some people are naturally more resilient than others. It can be down to the formation of their brains, how their brains developed, their kind of neurobiochemistry. It can be to do with coping mechanisms. It can be to do with coping strategies. It can be to do with mindset. It can be to do with relationships. But it can also be to do with the support they've had at the time. There might be some really small differences, like the first lady we're talking about, she might have had one trusted friend or someone she could confide in, or she may have started a relationship with someone from a young age that she found to be supportive, and allowed that to ground her. That person then became her safe space, where she was then able to confide in this person, also see that there was kind of like a different path for her life, and also to get out of the situation as well. Now, the second person might not have had that. They might not have been predisposed to being resilient. The way their brain developed might not have been the same. They also might have had absolutely no one. What defines this? Like, is there anything that guarantees whether someone will be resilient or not? Is there like a test for it? Well, I don't really think so, to be honest. Maybe there's some kind of genetic link to how someone is likely to turn out in terms of their mental health. I mean, certainly some mental health conditions, if a lot of people in your families are predisposed to having a severe mental health condition, then you may well be more likely to have it. So there's that argument, I suppose. But in terms of resilience, I'm not sure how how that would stack up. Now, why resilience is important is because how we could basically explain it and define it in the most base and obvious and simple terms would be saying it's your ability to bounce back. Now, what that means is not just being able to cope with adversity, but also being able to cope with positive things as well. I think it was Nietzsche that there's some quote out there about treating victory and defeat as the same, and basically not getting too sucked into it. That's obviously not a direct quote. That's me just faffing it out, but that's kind of the premise of what was going on. And it certainly holds true, because the only thing that is constant and you can basically count on it in life is the fact that it's always going to change. And I think what is meant there is, if you're having a great life, you're having a great time, and you get so caught up in it that it doesn't occur to you that your life might not always be this good. When something awful comes up on the horizon, it knocks you for six, and maybe it's more difficult to bounce back from it. Obviously, it's the same if you're going through a really awful time, because you get caught up in it, you can't see the end, and then of course you could be more likely to get involved in like substance misuse, self-medicating, kind of trying to find a way, or even if you've done it before, kind of adopting a maladaptive coping mechanism that you've had before that maybe worked once. You think, oh, actually, that will really help me now, and then you've got an even bigger problem, because then you've got the problem you had already, but you've also got the fact that maybe now you're a cocaine addict or something. I mean, spoiler alert again here. I was one. I am a recovered or recovering one. I've been clean for over 10 years, so go me. But that certainly was true for me. I took it because once upon a time I did it recreationally. It made me feel good. And then when I was going through a really difficult time, I was like, oh, wow, I feel awful, but I'll take this thing that made me feel really, really good once, and that will help get me through. And then fast forward several months later, and I'm in rehab, like 10 grand down, feeling absolutely awful, and 6 months away from a heart attack or a stroke. So that's kind of how easy these things can happen. But back to resilience, because this isn't all about me and my varied and checkered past. Why resilience is important is because it's us being able to pick ourselves back up and dust ourselves down. And it sounds like something that's maybe not the most important thing or really obvious. Perhaps, oh yeah, of course, something awful happened. You just get on with it. It's not really that. That's like a real oversimplification of it. It's being able to deal with your trauma, past, present, or perceived future trauma, I suppose, whatever you've got going on, and dealing with it in a way which is positive, in a way which allows you to move on from it. Not a way that's kind of compartmentalizing it and forcing it down and internalizing it, because that doesn't really work, or it works for a little while, but then when you're at a low emotional ebb, it will kind of creep back up, and then suddenly you've got that to deal with as well as the other awful stuff that you've got going down. Yeah, resilience is acknowledging something, moving on from it with positivity, kind of being like, I see you. I know what this is. I know this is not permanent. I know things will get better, or things will get worse, I suppose, if you're riding the crest of some wave of good fortune. Kind of accepting that things it's like life moves in cycles, I suppose, isn't it? It's like a revolving door. And if you put too much emphasis on what's going on in the present moment, that's kind of where you're stuck. And then when something comes along and changes, you're all over the place. You feel completely unstable. It's like all of your grounding components of your life are just swept away. Whereas if you have an open mind to change and the fact that change is inevitable, and throughout our lives we'll go through things which are positive, which are negative, which are neutral as well, actually, kind of like not really the low bits, but like just the plateaus where everything just kind of seems to chug along. None of that's permanent. Now, resilience is particularly important in terms of kids. Mainly because obviously kids grow up to be adults and older people. Everyone was a kid once, obviously. One of the things that really helps younger people build their resilience is having someone who's trusted, even if it's just one person, like a trusted friend or relative, someone who is their safe space. So if things go wrong, they know that there's a door that's open without any judgment, without someone who's going to kind of listen and be like, oh, yeah, yeah, and then go, well, I can't have that. You're grounded. Because when you do things like that to kids, the first thing that goes straight into their head is oh my God, I've done something wrong, or I've done something dangerous, which actually teenagers are prone to do. Like parts of their brain haven't developed properly. So that's why they do lots of risky things. They're only as old as their brains are, which sounds like a Carl Pilkington quote, but it's true. Like you can't expect adult behaviour from a toddler or a newborn or a teenager, and that is because parts of their brains have not caught up yet. But yeah, if you punish someone for opening up to you, which is essentially what you are doing to your child or teenager or young person in your life, if you punish them for opening up to you, the first thing that goes through their head is, well, you are not a safe space. I'm not talking to you again. You're not to be trusted. I'll find another safe space. And then we get stuff like young girls getting into inappropriate relationships with abusive men or other abusive women, or men being with other abusive men. Basically, people try and find stability and acceptance and their safe space because we're humans and that is what we all crave at the end of the day. But they all try and find it in the wrong place. And then that sets them up for a whole lifetime of further trauma because, well, you know how it goes. If someone enters into an abusive relationship, they can go through all sorts of trauma. They can bring children into that. The children become traumatized too. And it's just an awful, awful cycle, which can kind of be remedied quite early on, which is by putting yourself out there as your child's safe space or your teenager's safe space. Now, that's pretty hard. Like, I'm a parent, although my daughter was only 3, and I think I'd be quite worried if she came home and started telling me loads of like really outlandish stuff she'd been up to. I like to think when she's kind of older and in her teens, though, I would be the first person she comes to, or my husband. Like that would be fine too. Like the last thing I want her to think ever is I'm going to be in so much trouble when mum finds out, because my opinion and my perception and my reaction to whatever she does or has chosen to do should not ever be at the forefront of her concern. Her safety should be. And I would rather be, instead of it being like that, I'd rather it be, oh my God, I'm in so much trouble, I need to phone my mum. Like I would want to be like the first one on the scene, like the ambulance service or whatever. I want to be like the emergency first response that goes there, sorts things out, helps her, has a chat afterwards, but no punishment. Don't be doing the punishing, because that's just showing that you are unavailable. You've made yourself unavailable for future things where your child or teenager might need you. I know that's kind of pretty radical and groundbreaking, because you think, oh, well, I'm a parent. I've got to be a disciplinarian. I shouldn't be their friend. All of this. Well, I'd say, well, it's good to be friends with your kid. You're not always going to be friends with them. There is going to be stuff that you disagree with, but there'll be one day when they're making all of these crazy ass decisions themselves. You won't be there. And the last thing that's going to be in their mind will be like, oh, I'm doing this, and mum would think that, or dad would think whatever. Like if they're 18 years old and they're drunk in a field or something, as a parent, you're going to be the last thing on their mind. Like, trust me, um, I wasn't exactly concerned about what my parents were thinking by that point, because I was like, hey, I'm an adult, I can do whatever I want. And that's what kids will be like. And that's what they have to go through. They have these parts of their brains which are all about the risk taking and the finding boundaries. And it's kind of like taking off one of their stabilizers when they're on their bike. They're kind of getting ready to do it independently on their own, but they're kind of not, but they're trying to. And you want to be like the helping hand that's like, come on then, I'll run alongside you. Not like someone shouting from the other side of the pavement going, you're doing it wrong, you're rubbish, or whatever. Like, that's not really the parent you want to be. But it's so important in terms of resilience, building resilience for your kid, knowing that they have a safe person to go to, and that person's you. Now, you might know people in your life, or you might know kids, like maybe your child might have peers that perhaps they don't have a safe space, and you can be their safe space too. Obviously, it doesn't have to be quite as intensive as it might be with your own child, because obviously they're not your own child. But just let them know that someone's looking out for them, that someone cares, that someone's ready to listen. They might never go to you, they might never need to, they might never want to, but it's just the knowing that someone's there that is a really important thing for a young person, and even for anyone of any age, actually. Like, it's so important thinking, actually, there's people out there who care about me, I care about them, they've got my back, I've got theirs. Now, more resilience. There are 5 ways to wellness, which are all very important, and they're very helpful in terms of resilience as well. Because if your mental well-being is good and your mental health is good, you are more likely to respond well to a trauma. And the ways you can improve this are things like volunteering. I know it sounds a bit corny, but doing something you enjoy. It could be something like, I don't know, helping out in a charity shop, or it could be taking your old things to a charity shop. Make you feel good. You'll think, oh, I'm helping disadvantaged people. This makes me feel good, doing my little bit. Or it could be volunteering at someone's house or something, maybe joining a charity where you do some kind of home help, or speaking to people on the phone, or working with kids. I've done voluntary stuff. I do stuff in care at the moment as well, and my mentoring, and I'm deputy leader for a perinatal mental health support group, and it makes me feel amazing, because I will, any one of those jobs, even if it's really, really tough, and sometimes it really is, I will leave and I'll just think, I have helped someone, like I matter, I've done something that matters. I've done something that isn't all about me and my problems or my successes or whatever I've got going on in my life. I've done something that has made someone feel better in some way or another. I've made a difference. And for me, that's like the best feeling ever. Like, never mind winning the lottery or whatever, I don't really care about that. But feeling like you're able to help someone is really good. It makes you feel good. And when you feel good, then your mental health's good. So that helps. Things like healthy eating as well is really important, because, well, people say we are what we eat. I eat a load of rubbish. I love junk food. I love meat. I love crisps. I love sweets. I love desserts more than anything. Um, but eating healthy and getting exercise is a way to wellness, because it means that you've got a healthy, balanced diet. You're less likely to be obese. You're less likely to get any of these terminal illnesses, or like lifelong illnesses that will really, really hamper your own ability to enjoy your life. Like, if you become really overweight, you're probably not gonna be that keen on going for a nice brisk autumnal walk somewhere lovely and watch the sunset, which makes you feel great. There's a lot of perks to kind of maintaining your personal health. It's good, it's rewarding. Um, yeah, there's a lot of things you can do to build your own resilience, really, even just being aware of it, even thinking about it, and acknowledging how you feel, um, asking other people how they feel as well, and just talking about it, just being open and removing the stigma of like, oh no, someone's depressed, oh, we can't ever talk about it, everyone's mad, and all of that. I hate that so much. Like, I think I first accessed um, my local back in Kent mental health teams when I was 12. So this is 20 years ago because I am quite old. And the amount of support then was absolutely shocking. The amount of understanding was absolutely shocking. This isn't me knocking the NHS. I love it. I think the NHS is the best thing ever. And I would challenge anyone who says otherwise to a duel. But being a young person trying to get help, knowing that something's wrong, is very, 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 very hard. And what was even more hard was the fact that back then, no one talked about these things. It was like an embarrassing secret. It was like, oh, British stiff upper lip, but also like it's weakness. Oh, it's weak. You can just think your way out of it. Oh, have you tried going for a walk? Or have you tried being happy? Like it's some kind of active choice a depressed person makes, which it really isn't. Um, and things have come such a long way now since then. Now there's all these resources online. When I was 12, the internet was kind of a thing, but not really. Like we used Encarta. Now that's a blast from the past. If anyone's old enough to remember Encarta, now you can just type in depression or anxiety or anything like that on the internet, find out what they are, what the symptoms are, how to treat it. You can get help online. There's self-help things. You can book counselling appointments. You can find therapists. I found my last therapist online. She was brilliant. Um, it's there's so the world has changed so much since I was young, and it's changed for the better in that people can just be open and upfront. Like in my support group stuff that I do, people come in and we have an amazing time. A lot of the time we have cake, almost always two types. We have cups of tea. And we sit down in this room and we all have a chat and we talk about all sorts of things like how our kids are driving us mad because parenthood is very, very hard. The weather, what we've been up to, moaning about our other half, that usually takes up at least half the time, often more, it depends. Um, But then sometimes it will just go a little bit quiet, and then one of us will pipe up and go, I've had a really hard week. I have felt like absolute. And then we kind of, everyone's ears kind of prick up, and I'm like, yeah, me too. It's been so hard. And someone else will chime in and say, yeah, actually, like I thought I was getting better, but my PND seems to have just really up to notch this week. And there's just so much support because everyone's got a story. Like if you don't know someone who's been affected by mental health, then I would be very surprised because everyone seems to know someone or they are the person that has struggled with their mental health. It's like there's so many stories out there, and now we're actually able to tell them. Like once upon a time, we had the stories, but it was like, nope, 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 keep them in, can't talk about it, can't be weak. And now everyone is sharing, and it's wonderful. And I think that really helps in terms of resilience as well, because we're being able to see each other and go, actually, I thought it was just me suffering, but it's not. There's so many other people who are struggling too. We're sharing our stories and we're sharing our experiences and we're sharing our coping mechanisms. And we're finding ways to be resilient. We're also finding ways to build resilience in each other and encourage other people to be resilient and share what works for us or what doesn't work, what we're trying. Journaling is great. Journaling is another way to wellness, which is like writing down your thoughts and feelings, just getting them out, because when they're in your head, it's like it's amplified because they just bounce around, get louder and louder and louder over time, and it makes you feel like you're losing your mind. But if you can't say it to someone, that's fine. Like, some things are hard to say. Like, certainly there's some things I've never said to people in my life. Sometimes you just want to write things down, and you can keep it or you can burn it. That's something I've done that I really like doing. It feels very satisfying, burning something in the garden and watching it all flutter away. It just gets it out there. It's like it gets it out there into the universe and out of your head. And you always feel better afterwards. Well, I always do, and everyone who I've ever spoken to always seems to feel better as well when they write things down. And that's like one of these tools in like the resilience toolkit, ways that we find to make life less awful and ways that we find to make things more manageable. Because resilience is the goal. Obviously, we're thinking sometimes you get stuff come up. How am I going to cope with it? How am I going to manage? Most of the time, you will. I don't believe in the whole what doesn't kill you makes you stronger thing, because it's not true. Just look at things like polio or horrible diseases out there that leave you scarred for life or reduce your quality of life. I think that's such a glib, annoying little saying that people say. It's like, really, really, please. But it's about the experience. The experience is important, and acknowledging the experience is important. You don't have to love it and say that it's good, which is what that little saying does. It's like, oh, it's so good. Oh, it's made me strong. No, it hasn't. It's taught you some lessons, though, and you can look at your lessons that you've learned and go, actually, I'm going to keep this because I can refer back to it. It's a memory of an awful time I went through. I wish I hadn't gone through it. However, it is that I have. So, making the best of the awful trauma that I've gone through. But I'm going to take something good out of something awful, which is, I think, a pretty good thing to do. Like, it's healthy as well. That's a kind of a sign, I think, of healthy mental well-being, is looking for a positive and focusing on that rather than the negative, but also learning the lessons of the negative as well, because it would be silly to just focus solely on the positives, because there's actually a whole spectrum of experiences that we can learn from. It might not always be lessons that we like or that we want to learn, but they're usually lessons that we do need to learn. And resilience is helping us to maintain our sense of self, I suppose. It's not being unchanged by stuff that happens, because that would be impossible. Like, we all change over time, like hour by hour, day by day. We're kind of learning and evolving and everything. What it is being open to the change, accepting of the change, acknowledging the change as well, and saying, actually, okay, I'm in this position. I'm going to accept how I feel. I'm going to allow myself to feel the feelings that I have. I'm going to deal with these feelings that I've got that have arisen from this in whichever medium I deem necessary, like journaling, therapy, talking, baking. I bake all the time. One of the reasons I do it is because I have anxiety and it makes me feel a load better. It's cheaper than therapy and there's less chance of me regressing. So, yay. It's us being able to see the end of something, I suppose. It's like, I don't know, being on a ship and you're out in the sea and there's all mist around you and you think, oh God, this is hopeless. Our water supplies are running low. The crew's going to mutiny. What am I going to do? And then you kind of get your little telescope and have a look. And just through the clouds, you can kind of see something shadow and you think, oh, what's that? Land ho. And you think, well, actually, yeah, it's going to be a few days before we get to land, but I can see it. It's there. That is my goal. That's where I'm going. I'm going to deal with the mutinous crew and the fact that we're all going to be drinking our own wee for the next few days, but that's fine. That's my plan of action. I'm going to deal with that now. That's what's going to go on now. In the meantime, I'm going to tell everyone that there is land. This is going to be over soon. I'm going to deal with what I need to in the moment and start preparing myself for the future, because that's where we're going. And what the ship that I'm on now, full of angry pirates and no water, is not permanent. It will be over. I kind of see it for what it is. It's heading in the right direction and I'm dealing with everything in the way that I should. So that's kind of my resilience little descriptor, I suppose. If I do another one of these, resilience will come up because it is so important in terms of ACE scores, which are adverse childhood experiences, simply because, like, the enemy to an ACE and trauma is resilience, because it basically means that there is a positive outcome guaranteed if someone is resilient, as opposed to someone who is less resilient. Their outcomes are less likely to be as great, unfortunately. So yeah, there'll be resilience probably mentioned at least 1,000 more times in the future. But that's kind of my take on resilience, why it's important, what it is, a few little examples here and there of resilience. So yeah, sayonara, you matter.